people really tend to talk about like what it's like just being in theater in general, but never really talk about what it's like to be Black in theater. So for my short film, I will be talking about Black inequity in theater.
How much do I think being Black in the theater has affected me personally?
Yes.
I think all of the effects of being Black in theater have been overwhelmingly positive, just from the lineage of storytelling that we come from. August Wilson's, also the anti-apartheid stuff from South Africa, the Wole Soyinka's. The Greeks, if you want to count them as Black as well. It's just, I think it's been a blessing for me, personally, yeah.
I think it's very apparent that there are issues surrounding race in the theater because there are certain arrangements made, and I'm speaking from an actor standpoint, where sometimes I can very clearly see that a different race in a certain role has not been considered. I'm just going to say, for instance, hair and makeup. They may or may not have the proper tools to address a person of color being in a particular role. I actually just got off of an off-Broadway show where they had to hire specifically someone who knew how to care for Black hair. So that's one of the issues, just not being prepared to handle a person of color in a particular space, just not having the type of resources that are specifically for them available. It could also be, I will say that's one of the main areas that I see it the most, just ignorance of being able to handle a different type of hair texture, a different skin color, how it would look in certain materials, colors, things like that. Yeah.
That's a deep question.
It is.
Yeah.
It's a serious topic.
It's a really deep question.
My experience was very interesting because I had to really realize that before I went into any audition, any show. But what was magical about Something Like a Hat is that it was so diverse that it wasn't about being Black, it was about you and finding you. And I think that's the biggest thing when you walk into Broadway or to anything in the world, is if you don't know who you are, then you won't be able to book, you won't be able to do what you need to do successfully because they hired you to do the job. Not anything else, anybody else, but you.
It's still just as difficult, you know what I mean? Because we're talking about breaking into a business or breaking into an industry that's pretty much ran by white folk.
For theater, it's still difficult because some of the plays that I've done here, they are, to me, appropriation type situations, it's time for the Black plays and things like that. But I've just been trying to get better and better and better. So when you go to these situations, they'll have to be like, you can't say no. You know what I mean? So that's what I'm approaching it as, but I think it's still difficult for theater because no matter what, it's the whole business with theater, Broadway, and Hollywood, everything is a cliquey thing. Like, if they don't know you, it's rare that they're going to take a risk on you.
Just knowing how the system is, and knowing that our stories are not as widely told or accepted, or aren't as widely told because of probably, number one, the financial backing that it takes to produce a show in excellence in the grand scheme of things, than opposed to shows that are non-Black. I think the difficulty, like I said, comes from the support that should be around us, and we should put our money into that, into our stories, than opposed to waiting for someone to support us or or going to the shows that are popular and supporting the people that don't look like us.
Knowing the history of Broadway, in which minstrel shows were the start of on-stage performances, how do you think that has affected the featuring of Black people on Broadway?
I think Broadway has to be very careful of how people of color are perceived on stage.
Well, you already know. I feel like Broadway, especially because it doesn't seem to be solely concerned with telling stories for the American audience. It's more about telling stories that might make the most return on investment. That they get down to them. A lot of times they'll use the lowest vibrational form of creativity, and so that means a lot of stereotypes. A lot of them being negative stereotypes will be the things that you'll see on Broadway when it comes to black storytelling. A lot of tropes, tokenism.
And also, I think that people of color have to be comfortable speaking up, because sometimes, like, certain little microaggressions certain people may not even know that what they're doing or what they're saying has a certain effect and has a different appeal when you say it to a person of color. So I think that people of color have to be more comfortable speaking up and not feeling like, sometimes it can feel like, oh, I'm always playing the race card. But if you feel a certain way about something, the way you're being portrayed on stage.
Broadway should necessarily be the goal for any actor or storyteller. I feel like just telling the best story should be the ultimate goal.
How different do I think it would have been if I had been around in the 50s? I think there probably would have been, well, specifically with the American Negro Theater. Oh, I think specifically with that organization, it would have been great. Just because of the abundance of opportunities specifically for us. Now, outside of that, it probably would have been a little bit more difficult, because I feel like the roles that were available back then were probably the maids, the minstrel show type roles and things like that. So I feel like the American Negro Theater gave us an opportunity to be portrayed as full people, not just those side characters, but people with full whole lives and full whole stories, and not just somebody's side character or a footnote in somebody else's story, but giving us the opportunity to tell our own stories in a way that hadn't been seen before.
If I was alive during that time, I mean, at least you would have a home of a theater talent that you could be a part of. I think one of the things that has changed since the 50s, even though the 50s were a very difficult time to be black in America, period, is that if you were a theater artist, you at least could say, like, oh, there's a mecca for what I'm trying to do, and there are other people who are trying to do it within this climate. Now it seems that a lot of the black talents are going solely or mostly to predominantly white schools, and there aren't so many black established theaters that have the depth of resources to put on plays that can compete with mainstream theater. And that's unfortunate, but also we live in a more tolerant world, so it could be nice to have both, to have more theaters, black theaters like the American Negro theaters of the 50s. I think we should be working on having more, because everybody needs a home, everybody needs a tribe, everyone needs a source, and then we can all work together knowing that we feel comfortable with who we are.
Absolutely. It would have been, back then in the 50s, as today, we were all fighting, because this is something we love to do. This is a joy that we do. We can't stop it. I dance and hum in the kitchen while I'm cooking, you know what I mean? If it's something that's innate and is a part of you, you're going to find a way to do it. And that's what they did. They found their way. And that's the whole conversation, right? Of who stole what's music, who stole what dance. It doesn't matter, honestly, because truly we were finding our way to be happy and to be a part of what was innate in us. So yeah, I would have fought to be a part, and they would have seen me, do me, and they would have loved me because I fought for all of this. And I'm going to continue to fight, to dance, and live, and sing. And that's me.
Do you think with the times that have changed that it gradually gets easier, or Like, it's more of a...
We would want to think that.
Yes.
But with each new era, each new year, each new decade comes some of what was into some of what is. So we would want to believe that it should get easier for acceptance or for our stories to be produced in the same manner. But and I'm an optimist, so I don't want to be pessimistic on it. But in this reality that we're living in right now, you know that the it's still not balanced.
No, I think, you're kind of hot and then you're not when I look at people. There are a lot more stories being told, inclusive of blacks. I don't think it's easier. I think it's just that we need to have more of our programming. We have to, because the pool seems to still be about the same.
Taking the time to set up, plan, and do these interviews with the different people in the theater industry, both here in Nashville and in New York City, I would say what I learned is that you have to take your future in your hands, and that if someone isn't going to advocate for you, then you should advocate for yourself. You should always try your best to create the stories that you want to create on your own. And you got to be willing to take that risk yourself, so that way the reward can come later, because the only one that can tell your story is you.